Okay, today our main objective is to cover composition. Okay, I think you're Sec 2 now, so you are quite familiar with your O-level English syllabus, and I think you're also very familiar with what you will be tested or not. So for under composition, actually there are three aspects. Okay, under the compo paper, basically it's your paper one, right? Your paper one has editing, it has your situational writing, and of course, lastly, it has your continuous writing. Right? Okay, just to set the context, on top of that, of course, you also have your paper two, which is your compre paper. It actually involves visual text, right? And also it comprises of your your narrative text first. Okay, narrative text and your non-narrative text. So you need to understand all these components very well because you need to know what you're tested on, right? And then of course you have your paper three. Technically, it's not really a paper, which is your oral exam. An oral exam, there are two components. One of them is your reading aloud. Okay, you'll be given a passage and you read aloud. The second component will be your spoken interaction. Okay, whereby you have an interaction with the teacher, right? A spoken interaction. Then lastly will be your paper four, which is just one component here, which is your listening. Yeah, so these are all the things that you'll be tested on. And of course, today we can't possibly go through all the components during one tutorial. So what we do here is we usually will separate out the components and we'll cover maybe one component, one or two at most each tutorial. Okay. So having said that, later on you will find out what we are going to cover for compo. So same thing, it's not possible for us to cover editing, situation writing, as well as continuous writing all at once. So later on, we'll probably just focus on one aspect, okay? And also another thing that's really very unique about 88 Tuition is that we like to cover current affairs for English. And the reason is because I think you have to make yourself relevant and you need to be able to at least know what is going on in the world right now, right? It will be extremely useful for these components, especially your continuous writing. If let's say you are writing like an expository. Okay, I'm not sure whether you have been exposed to expository. For some schools, they will expose them to you in Sec 2, but some schools, they will do it in Sec 3. And also your argumentative. When you want to have an argument, you need to get your facts right first, right? So in this case, argumentative, it will be useful if you can use some current affairs to back your argument. Okay, so knowing current affairs, I think is really useful for continuous writing. Fit writing, not so much because you'll be given a piece of text. Yeah. The next thing that will be very useful, if you know a lot about current affairs, would be on non-narrative text. Okay, because non-narrative texts basically are based on a lot of facts, information. Okay, so if you know more, it's better because we will never be able to predict what is going to come out for your non-narrative text. But if you are very well versed in current affairs, you know what is going on very well, and you have a broad, spectrum of what you know, then it might give you the advantage of understanding the non-narrative text. Okay. And lastly, why do we emphasize on current affairs? It's because I think it will also help you in terms of spoken interaction. So when when we have like a conversation, right? If you have a lot of knowledge, if you have a lot of information at hand, I think it's easier for you to strike a conversation and also to sustain the conversation. Okay, so I think it will help you in terms of oral as well. Yeah, so that's why we do composition. We also do current affairs But again, like I said, composition is not all the lessons. Not every lessons will be covering compositions. For some lessons, we'll be covering some answering techniques for comprehension as well. And also your editing, visual text, whichever. Okay, so back to Satmi. I think, do you type in the chat? Let me have a look. No, Satmi, you have not typed in the chat. You can't think of any? Are you also supportive, Satmi? No? Satmi, are you there? Yeah?
Yeah.
Supportive?
Yeah.
I would think maybe you are a bit shy because you're quite quiet. Are you shy, Satmi? Yes?
Little bit.
Okay, right. Okay. So let's move on, okay? We'll get started with our composition first. Okay, today we're going to focus on composition. And by composition, a lot of times, right, for your continuous writing, there are many different genres. Okay, I think one very common genre which have been covered in Sec 1 and 2 would be personal recount. Okay, I'm sure you're familiar with personal recount, right? Then, of course, on top of that, I think we do a lot on descriptive as well for lower sec. Narrative, some of you do personal recount, some will be descriptive essay, right? So in this case, today we will be focusing, we're not definitely not going to have time to cover all genres as well. So today we'll look at descriptive. So what's going to happen for O levels is that you will be given a few topics to choose from. And those topics basically cover a variety of different genres. So whichever genre that you're most comfortable writing or whichever topic that you're most familiar with, I'll recommend you to choose that one. Okay. But then again, we still have to prepare you for all genres, right? So then you will be ready. Okay. Whichever genre you can also write. Yeah. So this one. Okay. Today we'll be focusing on the genre of descriptive essay. Descriptive essay, as the name suggests, tells us that you need to describe, right? So a lot of times, descriptive essay, it will have a lot of descriptive elements, okay? It can be written in first person's point of view, means, I'm describing something, maybe something that happens in my house, my favorite animal, my favorite place to go after school, right? It can also be in third person's point of view. So it can be like from the point of view of someone else, okay? It does not really require a storyline or a narrative, not necessarily, okay? Generally, it's to appeal to the five senses, right? So you notice over here, there's this key point, some of the keywords here, okay? It uses a lot of illustrative, oh, this one is not a highlighter. Hold on a second. Yeah, okay. Uses a lot of illustrative language. And one of it is your imagery. Okay, imagery are words that appeal to your five senses. Okay, later on you'll understand what we mean by appealing to your five senses. Yeah, so you can like describe about the smell, right? When we talk about five senses, you can describe about the smell, the sight of it, the looks of it, the taste of it, okay, the touch, the feel of it. And one more is probably what you will hear. Okay, so those are the senses. And of course, you should be using a lot of figurative language, which you might have learned in, I think you might have learned in literature. Okay, later on, we'll look at some examples. Okay, one of the example would be like simile and metaphor, right? So a lot of figurative language because for descriptive essay, you have to use a lot of flowery language. Now, for this genre of essay, I think I will recommend for someone who um okay, someone who's very familiar with, or rather someone who has a very broad knowledge or have a wide variety of vocab, then you can choose this essay. Otherwise, you might not score so well if you do not have a lot of flowery language and illustrative language. Okay, so the third one would be using precise language. Now, by precise language, what do I mean? Okay, you want to give concrete details. You do not want to be to give too wordy, if you're being too wordy, it means that you have a lot of redundant words, which might not seem so good. Okay. So what are some keys for precise language? One of it is try to avoid wordiness. Okay, let me just change this color a little bit. Okay, so the first thing is definitely to avoid wordiness. Because if you're too wordy, it's not precise, it's not concise. It may seem like you're repeating yourself, becoming repetitive and also redundancy. Okay, might not be so good for the readers. Yeah, it might confuse the readers a little bit. Okay, and you might be boring as well. So when you want to use precise language, you need to use concrete details. Okay, using concrete details. And of course, you have to pay attention to diction. And you do need to write with appropriate connotations. Okay, by using concrete words, means we are using exact words instead of vague and general words. Like for example, the car hit the van. Full stop. Okay, I know I said to avoid wordiness. Avoid wordiness means like, free gift. I mean, the gift is obviously free, right? So to make it more concise, just give will do. So that is avoiding wordiness. But at the same time, sometimes, right, doesn't mean avoid wordiness means everything you just give like one or two words. Yeah. Sometimes we would also want to use concrete details. Like for example, the car hit a van. So to give a concrete detail, make it more vivid for your reader, you can say, for example, the front of a red Toyota smashed into the bumper of the white van. So with that in the mind, right, of the reader, uh, it will probably come to the reader's mind a vivid picture of a red color Toyota smashing into the bumper. Okay, you can even imagine the position of the car, the colors of the car, so it appeals to your five senses. Okay, so same thing for like, for example, concrete details. We're talking about concrete details doesn't mean you give redundant words. Okay, like for example, the woman walked home, right? So the old woman hurried down the empty street, impatient to be home for her afternoon nap. So the way she walked home, you can already imagine, right? She was impatient. She was in a rush because she wanted to go home to take a nap. Yeah, so that is the meaning of using concrete details. So far, are we clear? Okay, I will touch on imagery and figurative language later because I think there isn't much on precise language in the following slide. So I think I want to touch on that a bit more. Okay, so it's basically to avoid wordiness, to use concrete details. Okay, and then what do we mean by pay attention to diction? Okay, so basically diction means the choice of words. Okay, and choice of words are very important, okay, because the implied meaning might be different. Diction may be formal or informal, but of course, most of the time in terms of descriptive writing, it's considered formal writing. We do not use informal language, okay, unless we're writing a dialogue. Then you can use informal language. Yeah. So formal diction uses more formal language. It uses specialized words. Definitely, they don't use contractions. Contractions as in like they will. Okay, this is correct. We do not use they'll unless, okay, we are writing a dialogue, right? And of course, we will try to use words with appropriate connotations. Okay, connotations means the additional feelings or ideas that are attached to the word. Okay, let me just give you a small note here. Okay, additional ideas or